All right, folks, we're now down to what we term as vertical tillage. And really, vertical tillage is a tillage practice where we're slicing and dicing residue and we're leaving strips in between unworked. So the agronomic theory behind that is a field color when you have 100% overlap with a 47-degree sweep going through the soil profile, it creates a small barrier or small compaction layer that inhibits root growth. Thus, they came out with a vertical till system where they can still move some soil, slice some residue, and provide a very nice seed bed to plant into the next year without the inhibition of the roots. So, we introduced the Accelerator. This is basically our third model. We had the 8000, 8005. There's some similarities with them. When we had the 8000, it was a greasable design. The 8005 went greaseless. Very few changes other than that. When we came to the 8010 was where we made some pretty large changes to it. The similarities to it are still we have a 32 flute blade. And remember we talked about that 32 flute blade on the Interceptor. But that was a shallow concavity blade. This blade is a flat center blade. And it's got about a 1/4 inch dish to it. The nice thing with that is it's a boron composite, so it's a very durable blade. It's got very good wear characteristics to it. It has that beveled edge just like the other one. And if you take a look at this, it hasn't been ran in the field. It's basically, obviously, you can shave with it, but it doesn't take long to take that edge off. The nice thing with that blade is it continues to cut for the life of the blade, almost to a fault. I've got farmers up in North Dakota running machines that should have been rebladed about 10,000 acres. They're up to 18,000 plus, but the blade's still cutting. What you're losing is you're losing that 1/4 inch dish because part of a vertical till system is not only sizing the residue, but getting what I'll call fines on top of the residue. And those fines are basically your microbial activity. Once we have some moisture, that's going to help to break that residue down. We have a 7-inch spacing on the front, 8-inch spacing on the back, so it's basically a net of 7.5-inch spacing. So I would say it's a way to fillet the fish differently in that we got that narrower spacing, but we have more open in the back. Because generally, if you loosen your soil in the front, where do you generally have plug-in issues is through the rear of the machine. So that's why we're narrow in the front and we're out wider in the back. One of the changes that we did make when we went from the 8000 to 8005 is farmers were looking for the ability to do just a little bit more for it. So we went to a 1 to 8 adjustable with this design. And the nice thing with it is you can see the gauges we have up top. So that's our front gang angle and that's our rear gang angle. So right now we're running at an 8 and 8 degree angle. We've got this little box right here. Well, I guess they made it theft proof, so it stays on the implement. But this little box, if you click it to the back setting, with the hydraulics, we adjust the back gangs. You put it in the front setting, and it adjusts the front gangs. We keep it in the middle and adjust them basically the same. So you've got a lot of flexibility to this machine. Our 8000, 8005 did not have the hydraulic gang adjust option that I will say was very easy to work with because it was a pin design. You had to get out, change pins, and adjust your angle. This, if you notice on this new design, you've got your pivot point in the center of that gang. So we got equal pressure on each side of it, which gives us the ability to adjust it on the go. So basically from the cab of the tractor, you can dial in the output that you want through the machine. So a lot of times guys will ask me, what do you recommend for settings on it? Well, the old design, since it was more cumbersome to adjust, we basically just ran a 5 and a 5, as aggressive as you could be. What I find with this new design is that guys are more apt to run, I would say, less angle and more angle. Now, come fall time, a lot of guys will say, well, I'm just going to run 8 and 8. But in the springtime, they're maybe running 4 in the front, 3 in the back. And it's just based on that pass to pass. Hey, what am I seeing coming out of the back, and do I like what I'm seeing? So there's a very nice change that they made to the design of the machine. Now, one thing with this design is you can also add an isobus system. So you can have it basically, they mount your hydraulic blocks on the tongue, you get your CPU, you run your isobus, into the tractor, and it's basically working off of your monitor. And that's going to control a lot of, basically 6 functions on the machine. I talked about the hydraulic gang adjust. It'll control our wing down pressure. I'll talk a little bit more about that. It'll control our depth. It controls our star wheel pressure, and forward aft leveling. Depth. So basically, it's got 8 presets, so you can have it where, hey, you got some high hills, or hey, I don't want to run real aggressive angles. You can have hilltops, 1 and 1, or whatever that combination is, or you can have a spring setting. So you've got a lot of options with that. And it is a true ISO-bus system, so as long as your monitor is running ISO, it's a plug and play, which I even hate to say that because it's a lot of times plug and pray, but that's more based on your monitor type. So I talked a little bit about when you're running a vertical till system, I talked a little bit about controlling our hydraulic wing down pressure. That's basically controlled through this box. I talked about it in the Interceptor. Very similar design in that we unfold it. There's sensors on the wings. When it unfolds, the solenoids then click it over to your continuous flow port, and we can adjust our wing down pressure. Basically, you're going to set that right there about 250, 350, and then you're going to run that spring and fall the same. So it's a set it and forget it setting on that. This block here, that's what this is controlling. All we're doing is we're turning solenoid power on or solenoid power off, and that's so we're basically activating power to adjust that gang, basically adjusting power to adjust the rear gang. So very simple. And then the star wheel block I'll talk a little bit about. But with the hydraulic wing pressure, if you think about a machine that you can run, well, if you're in Iowa, 10 mile an hour. Up here we got too much rock, so I always say 6 to 8 mile an hour. Because if I say 8 to 10, you're going to run at 10. If I say 6 to 8, you're going to run at 8. So as you start to increase speed, what's going to happen to this outer wing? What keeps that in the ground? There's really nothing to keep it in the ground. So we basically take wing down pressure and hold that so that our outer wing is running the same as our center. In a vertical till system, maximum depth you can run is to the bottom of that fluid. But as you'll see out here, that's always ground dependent. So if you're basically running, say, 2 to 3 inches in the spring, well, if your outer wing's doing this, we're introducing inconsistency. And again, inconsistency is not good in a planting environment. So that's going to keep our outer wings running the same as our center, same as our outer wings. And that's basically controlled through with our wing down pressure. So we got the single point depth here, and then basically our forward aft leveling is right there. It's a 3 to 1, very easy to adjust, but it's 3 turns to 1 turn on a regular turnbuckle, so that gets a little bit confusing. Not confusing, but you always got to count. I get confused because I'm thinking, well, 3 turns, that seems like a lot, but it's just 1 turn on a regular turnbuckle. So.
And that is something that once it's set to the tractor, you're not going to readjust that. You're not going to adjust that for field conditions or anything like that. So it's once you hook it to whatever tractor and it's leveled to that, that's where you're going to leave it for your season. So
yeah. So as we kind of come back through the machine, we've got a tine harrow. And again, like I mentioned with the Interceptor, it always seems like it's a harrow out of place. But it's kind of doing the same function as it is on the Interceptor, except it's a little bit more important because on the Interceptor, we've got a blade that's actually moving soil, and we're cutting 100% of that profile. When we're talking about vertical till, how do we move residue? You really can't move residue because we're running a shallow angle, so we're kind of, I always say, kind of like tossing a salad. This will actually physically move that residue and redistribute it. So as the wind blows and you got piles out in your field, we've got the ability to redistribute it. It can also do some pre-leveling because, again, when you're in the vertical till system, you get undulations, something like this. It can be hard to level, or you got, say, your fall tillage implement leaves, 6-inch valleys. Well, this will help to do a little bit of that pre-leveling as well as the blades and the gang angle. So one thing I should mention in the gang angle, we stopped at 8 degrees. There's manufacturers out there that go up to 12, that go up to 17, that go up to 21 degree gang angles. The reason we stopped at 8 is the blade wear was very excessive once you went past 8 degrees. If you want to run, an all-in-one, 12, 16, they're always going to be short at something, but what they're not going to be short at is maintaining blade life, because the more angle you run, it's a straight blade, you're basically shearing that. That's why we stopped at 8 degrees. So our adjustment for our center tine Harrows here. The nice thing with it is we got good visual from the tractor. We can see if we're running too aggressive and we're piling residue and releasing that residue, we can basically relax that for this low residue environment. We just set it in the center setting. So, and then as we go towards the far back of the machine, we've got the star wheel design, and that was basically the same as we talked about in the Interceptor, but agronomically it's for a different purpose on this machine. So when you're running vertical till, remember at the beginning I was talking about, and you'll see it out there where you're running blade, unworked. So basically that unworked has a little hump to it. And actually I heard this from a John Deere person. They call that the bread loaf effect. I thought that's brilliant because it looks like a little bread loaf out there. And basically what that's designed to do, the star wheels, is we're indexed on that to minimize that and get that more of a smooth subsurface. Guys, it's not going to be 100%. It can be depending on the depth that you're running, soil conditions, but you still sometimes will have some of that little undulation. But it's really the only machine in the market in the vertical till arena that can minimize that hump. You take a look at what some other manufacturers are doing. Some are running a single reel. Well, a single reel is not going to take unworked soil out. Basically a reel is designed to basically size clods, right? So if you're running a double reel, what are you doing? You're sizing those clods twice, and agronomically, I think that's getting our clays too fine. So here we're just running that single star wheel to take care of that. Again, we got the hydraulic pressure gauge up there, and you can just adjust that to help to minimize that. And then we run the 80-pound reel on it. This is that new style reel. It's got the solid centers. It's got extra protection over that reel. More designed for the Interceptor that we're running at 8 to 10, but it's a nice feature also on the Accelerator. For a fall type application, you notice here we've got our reels unplugged or unpinned. You can run that pin through the reel, and then we got 80 pounds of down pressure. In the fall, we don't want to basically firm or really even size clods. What is more important is that we get as much depth as we can to get as much soil mixed on that residue as we can. So my recommendation is we unpin it like we have this now. So this is just basically rolling along the ground, and we're not going to run any star wheel pressure. Because again, if we're running, say, 250 pounds here, we're lifting up in the back of the machine. Compounding by 80 pounds here, we're lifting up the back of the machine. In the fall, I want to keep the weight over the blades so that we get our maximum amount of mixing as possible. And that's kind of how we're going to run it out here today, is we're going to run with this basically no down pressure. So come springtime, with no down pressure, and also we add down pressure, what's going to happen in the front of the implement come springtime? It's going to want to basically go a little bit nose deep, so you might have to do a simple spring to fall adjustment on that leveling link that we talked about earlier. So, and again, with the ISO system, you could have a spring setting, you could have a fall setting, and it could automatically make that adjustment for you. And we're not talking a lot, it's maybe a turn or a turn and a half is all the adjustment that we're doing on that. So, Jason, you got some additional?
Not really.
Comments?
Talk about additional weights.
Oh, good point. So Craig had mentioned about additional weight. So you take a look at some of the other manufacturers. What do they got up on their frames? Weight kits. And part of that is you don't build the weight into the machine. That can be, we got a manufacturer that's 4 feet shorter, so you're taking out that framing. So what happens when it's shorter, that residue soil is going to come into that blade, over the blade, but they got to hang weights on it. There is a manufacturer, you know where they hang their weights? They hang their weights in the center of the frame, and they call it weight transfer. So now you got your cylinders taking all that weight lifting up the main frame and holding it through the field. I don't know about you guys, but I'm a little uncomfortable with holding weight on cylinders. There are other manufacturers that will actually put them on the wings because they don't have the hydraulic wing down pressure. So different way to flay the fish, but we've lengthened the frame to allow the additional weight and the additional residue flow through the machine. So good point. Thanks, Greg.